After 2 years of development, community outreach, and deliberation, the Home in Tacoma legislative package is in the final stretch and headed for a vote of the City Council that's expected in November. The package includes a comprehensive update of zoning and building codes and standards to encourage more housing density, more missing middle housing choices, and more affordable housing development in our rapidly growing city. Brian Boudet from the city's Planning and Development Services Department is here today to give us an update. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
All right, well, let's get right into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. So, Brian, can you tell our viewers, how did Home in Tacoma get started?
Yeah, so this really goes back more than 5 years, where the City Council kind of recognized that the city was really struggling with affordable housing in particular, as housing prices have been going up pretty dramatically for now a couple of decades, really pinching residents in this city. And the move was really to look at what are all the various ways in which we can support more housing choice, more housing affordability, and more housing supply. So the council adopted an affordable housing action strategy a number of years ago, and it laid out really like 27 different strategies on how the city can really approach and try to make progress on housing affordability. And one of those was to look at the city zoning rules and recognize that our zoning history has really focused primarily on single family housing development in most of our neighborhoods. And we really need to look at providing more options in our residential areas in order to really address choice and really provide more affordability for folks.
Absolutely. And so, we do understand that the program covers many topics and changes to the city's zoning and building standards. So why is this needed, and why can't we just stick with the current plan that we have in place?
Yeah, so for most of Tacoma's history, we've been growing out. And we've gotten to a place now where we really can't grow out very much more. We're surrounded by cities, and most of the land in Tacoma has already been built on. And so our option is really to grow up. There's more people coming to the Puget Sound, there's more people coming to Tacoma, and in order to find space for them, we really need to provide opportunities for infill development in our existing neighborhoods. So another piece of this is really the state similarly has recognized this challenge and essentially mandated that cities, and particularly large cities like Tacoma, have to shift away from these single family exclusive neighborhoods and allow more housing variety and more infill into community.
Okay, and can you also let our viewers know what is missing middle housing?
Yeah, so missing middle. So the middle part of it is essentially everything that kind of falls between traditional single family and big developments, the big apartment complexes that you might see that have 100 or 200 units in them. So this is anything from duplexes, accessory dwelling units, which also called mother-in-law units, triplexes, really everything up to about 10 or 20 units. And they call it missing middle because it's a type of housing that if you go back 100 years was fairly common in communities like Tacoma, and we have it in places, but for a long portion, really we just built little stuff, single family, and big stuff, big apartment buildings. And so for much of the development history of the community, you really don't find this sort of mid-scale of residential development. So that's why they call it missing. It's the missing middle.
Gotcha. So now, Brian, we know that over the course of the past couple of years, there's been a lot of community outreach, feedback, and based on what the community has shared, what changes have been made?
Yeah, so this, like I say, really starting 5 years ago, but particularly over the last 2 years as we've been working on the zoning and the development standards to try to implement the new policy that council adopted, there's really been an unprecedented level of community engagement as part of this process. So, that has really influenced pretty significantly what is now before the City Council for their final consideration. We heard a lot of support. This project has a lot of change, and so there's no doubt there's a lot of support, and there's also a lot of concern from the community about what's in the package and what kind of change that might create in people's neighborhoods, that's very sacred to them. So some of the big things that we heard from community concerns about ownership, about demolition of existing structures and trees, have really been some of the biggest themes that we heard from community. And the Planning Commission and the City Council and what's been put forward has really tried to put together a package that reflects and responds as best as it can to some of those concerns. So they've really made some changes to really promote ownership opportunities so that it's not all rental housing that gets built in this missing middle, that it doesn't necessarily result in just complete demolition of structures all over the community. It's trying to infill new development into neighborhoods, and also that we try to preserve what's really important. So some of the existing housing stock, as well as existing important livability features like some of the big trees that we have in Tacoma.
Well, I love the idea that the community was able to provide feedback in order to recognize some of the changes and just to be a part of the process. So, that's great that the community was able to provide that, and the department is using that feedback in this process. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's a huge thank you to the community, really, that came out. I mean, thousands of pieces of input over, a couple of years time period here that has had a dramatic influence in what is really before the council for their final look.
Absolutely. So Brian, final question, what's next and how can the community weigh in?
Yeah, so like I say, we've gotten a lot of input so far, but we're at a really critical point in the process. After those couple of years of analysis and study and engagement, now the package is before the City Council, and so they get to make the final call on this whole thing. Right now, the schedule has them making their decision in mid-November, November 19th. And so I really invite folks to track along. You can definitely get a lot of information at the project website. But as it goes through the council process, people can still interact with their council members. People can come to those council meetings either in person or online and provide input. So really at two different opportunities coming up. The first one is October 29th. The council will be holding what they call first reading of the ordinance. And then also at the final reading when the vote will be taken, November 19th. Again, people can come to the council meeting and tell the council what they like or they don't like or what they think should be changed.
Gotcha. So October 29th. And what time will that be?
Yeah, so the meetings start at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock, okay.
Yep.
And then the second one, November
19th.
Same time.
5 o'clock also.
All right, awesome. Well, we appreciate you being on the show today, Brian. And we all know that affordable housing has been a challenge. So thank you to you and your team for everything that you're doing. And we look forward to seeing you back on the show for an update.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
All right.